you will have 90% all res before you get to maps. That's basically what this class is telling you. It's fucking stupid. And I will, as I've done with previous videos, we're going to talk about this from a minion perspective for the most part, and what my plans are. However, I will point out a couple things with this that's not about minions. And first and foremost, I am very excited about trying out Manifest Weapon. You see, back in the day, there was a league called Breach in Path of Exile 1, and it was a fantastic league. It also was a league that made animated weapons in Path of Exile 1 meta builds for minions back then. And it was fantastic. It was so beautiful to play. It was my favorite build till Spectres took over my favorite roles of minion builds in PoE 1. And we'll see how it goes in PoE 2. However, when I finally will be playing this MIDI, I will be playing a Manifest Weapon build, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in a very effective way. However, we don't have information on the skill, we don't have patch notes, so I can't really talk about the skill too much. I just hope it's going to be good. So instead, I'm going to talk a little bit about the class itself and why this class is so ridiculously good in the game right now. Not just for minion builds, but for literally any build at all. And the reason for this is that it's kind of easy for this class to get 90% elemental resistances even before you reach maps. So the way the system works with this class is that the Smith's Masterwork, this node here in the middle, it says this passive skill is free to allocate. And you get 2 skill points to your Ascendancy skill points per Ascendancy, which is, there's 4, so you get 8 points in total. With 8 points, you can then freely spec into these nodes here, as many as you want. You can have a build that just puts 8 of these. It will require you to only use a normal body armor. That sucks. I know, there are some implicit ones, some with life regen, some with all resistances, shaman mantles for spirit, for example. Pretty cool. So that's quite interesting. However, the nodes we have here is Flowing Metal. Body armor grants you 5% plus the maximum fire res. Molten Symbol. Body armor grants 25% of physical damage from hits taken as fire. Now, luckily, in Path of Exile 2, as of right now, physical damage mitigation is completely irrelevant, so most people wouldn't even care about this that much. It's kind of nice, but it's not like a big deal. Next one is Internal Layer. Body armor grants hits against you have 50% reduced critical strike bonus. It's not a bad modifier, to be fair. Leather Bindings is giving you 5% life regeneration, not too shabby. Then you have 75 lightning res. You have 20% increased strength. You have 15% increased maximum life. You have cold and fire res, unaffected by ignite, 100% stun threshold, as well as having your armor applies to chaos damage taken from hits. Essentially, the strength and life are the 2 main ones from this, and that's basically the main part to consider here. Those are the 2 main ones. So we have 2 other main nodes outside of the Smith's Masterwork, and that is Cold Stoker and Forged in Flames. 2 points to Coal, another 2 connecting from this to get Forged in Flames. And what they do is Cold Stoker makes it so that modifiers to fire resistance also grants Cold and Lightning Res at 50% of their value. And then you have Forged in Flames, which is modifiers to maximum fire res, also grants maximum cold and lightning res. You're going to want to take this one for a very specific reason. And the reason I say that the life and strength are the main modifiers here, and why you don't want to take the +5 to max fire res, is actually because of the passive skill tree. There's a node here in the bottom left corner called Unnatural Resilience that gives you 2% maximum fire res for each 40% uncapped fire. Since you're basically able to more or less capture all your elemental resistances by only having fire res modifiers on your gear, you don't have to think about cold and lightning. And since you can get so much fire res and 50% of that to capture cold and lightning, you just stack fire res. And if you need help with that, you can take tantalum alloy. Okay, that's a weird word. Tantalum alloy to even help with that before you have gear that carries this for you. So in the early stage, you take Cold Stoke or Forged in Flames, and then you get the life, and you get the strength, and you get the fire. Like you basically tweak this as much as you want to. So you basically would start with Cold Stoker, and then probably take the life, and then strength, and then the next node you probably take the fire res and I don't know, the region or something, or then you go Forged in Flames. So there's a lot of ways for you to get stupidly good defenses with very minimal investments, especially with things like this, which is why with proper gearing later, you won't need Flowing Metal. You might want to use Flowing Metal in the early stage, but that's a node that goes away, and then you don't have to worry about it. So if I look at this from a minion perspective, what I would start with is, hopefully the skill will be good, is to spec 2 points into Manifest Weapon. And then the next 2 points, I would very likely grab modifiers of fire res applies to cold and lightning res. And then I would wait with the max res. And my next ascendancy points, I would probably grab the strength and life nodes And then the last Ascendancy, I would then ramp up my max resistances. That's probably the approach of the route or priority of notes that I would take on a minion build. This is all theoretical, no information on the skill, no patch notes. That's the theoretical approach, however. But when it comes to non-minion builds, this node, like the Smith's Masterwork, is so ridiculously strong because of how easy it is for someone to get 90% all elemental resistances. You get tons of strength for life stacking, you get extra HP at the cost of just having your body armor be a white base item. It is just insane, and I think that this is going to be one of the more played classes when it comes to solo self-fight environments, when it comes to approaches of hardcore. I think this will be one of the more tanky ones, because this is kind of like the equivalent of a chieftain in Path of Exile 1. It's just, here's your defense. This is your defense. You're welcome. Now you can just do whatever you want with your offense, because you're just not going to die anymore. And I think that's really cool. However, there's some other things on the left-hand side we're going to talk about. The node leading up to Manifest Weapon is 20% minion damage. The one on the left side of this is leading into Temper Weapon, which I'll be talking about in a moment. I'll actually deep dive this a little bit. And then on the far left corner, you have Fire Damage leading into Fire Spell on hit, which my understanding is a skill that will just trigger a Fire Spell similar to the Mjolnir weapon that was teased in the reveal. See if I can find it right here, which is Grant Skill, level 18, Lightning Spell on melee hit. My understanding is that these will be meta skill gems required to build up energy to then trigger the spell. I'm not sure how good it's going to be, and I can't really argue for it. However, Temper Weapon looked really cool. What it does is that the character basically summons out an anvil that it starts hammering and smithing its weapon, and basically buffing your weapon. And then that weapon will then have essentially exerted attacks similar to Warcries in PoE 1. And I was talking to Darth, Woody, and Karn last night about this, and we kind of came to the conclusion that, you know, it's kind of similar to the Ritualist. The Ritualist has a modifier, or a node that lets you carve up a cow on the ground, and it takes a few seconds to do this. It's kind of immersive, but then you only get a buff for 20 seconds. You know, that doesn't sound like that's a very fun experience to play that. But the argument was, I believe it was Darth that said it, that it would feel really good if this was a buff that lasted a couple of minutes, so that you went into a map, you started hammering your weapon for a few seconds, and then you play the entire map. And that seemed pretty obvious, and then we had some arguments and discussions around this, and I basically said that there's no shot that's going to happen. I said that it's more likely that you'll have to consistently do this quite often, similar to how the Ritualist is approached. Obviously, you have to keep in mind that maybe we can make this have more charges or last longer for whatever reasons with the 100+ support teams we're going to get access to. And, you know, we left that conversation at that and moved on to other topics. Then this was shown to me. I'm going to show you a really fucked up thing here. So let's see, so I'm not covering it. This is a display of the... come on, stop chatting. Get a room already. Come on. An eternity later. Okay. So, the dude is hammering an anvil. This is the ability to temper your weapon. Bottom right corner, under the keybind T. T for trash. It says 2. Look at number 2. Let me play. Boom. He's hit the first hammer on his weapon. Direct your eyes to the T for trash again. Number 2 is now 3. Let's go again. One more hit, bro. One more hit. And boom. Look at that beauty. 3 is now 4. Then we keep going. And you have a really cool effect of this. Watch this. He uses an ability. Puts this on a cooldown, it seems. And 4 turns into 3. So this attack he is currently conducting is now using one of the charges. So he spent several seconds hitting a weapon to get charges that is consumed with a small cooldown to do this. Oh my god, look at that. That entire attack. Look at that. Boom. Really cool. Really massive effects. That looks really amazing. It really does. But he went from 4 to 3 charges. And now, watch the number 3. Is now number 2. But it seems like there was still a cooldown happening. So that seems like the exerted attacks doesn't get affected by the cooldown. That might only be to be able to do it again, is my guess here. Because the cooldown is going to be off here in a second. He lands. Amazing. Boom. But now he's down to 2 charges. So essentially, what I'm seeing here is that we're basically talking about having a charge set buff that you have to spend seconds hammering your weapon with, and every time you use an attack, it will then consume one of those charges to do massive hits. But then again, this might be okay if the damage is ridiculously high that you get from this, right? That means it's like, oh, you're fighting a big rare, you might want to buff up your weapon to do giga damage, prepping for a boss fight. Those things could make sense. We might see some, we can clown on this all we want, because I was laughing my ass off about this, because this looks like horrible shit from my perspective based on this information. But without the patch notes and without seeing the support gems, that might solve this to go from, you know, maybe not T for trash, but T for I don't know, I can't think of a good word on T other than tits. So you could go from trash to tits, I guess. Everybody likes tits. So yeah, but that's like, kind of like the information that we have right now. And it's just... I'm trying to keep a straight face, being objectively not biased here. But what the fuck, man? Look at this. 2 goes for 3 charges. I'm trying. 4 charges. Oh, look at that. His weapon is big. He's using two-handed weapons, and he only did it on the main hand. Boom, boom, boom. Well, the 4 charges down to 3. Like, yeah, blah, 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 explosion. I can't, man. I just can't. Dude, I'm not sold on this at all, bro. I'm trying my best to be professional here. I'm trying. But it's like, I'm not sold on that. And I can't say much about it. We are very likely going to see things being adjusted, patch notes, support gems that would make this significantly better. At least that's the hopes. So we can clown on it till we see that, I guess. But I'm hoping that there's going to be some significant options for players to utilize to actually make that reasonable, because that's 2 points invested to get that. But from a baseline, it looks horrible. And then you have the fire spell on hit, which is like the whole trigger thing. See if people can play with that. And we have no information on that manifest weapon. But that's like literally the Smith of Kitava when it comes to the Ascendancy stuff that he has available that is optional stuff. Because I think that the main part of the Smith of Kitava that makes this class so ridiculously good, not just for minion builds if the manifest weapon is good, but like for everything, it is the Smith's masterwork. I was first under the impression that it felt kind of awkward. Like, what do you mean I have to use a white armor and then pick, a couple of mods on it? I feel like they've done a really good job with the Smith's Masterwork node. It feels really good. It allows you to get really good strength. It's a ridiculous amount of defense for playing the Smith of Kitava. And at the sacrifice of a body armor feels like it's a reasonable trade-off for this type of power. So I'm quite excited for this class, and I hope the manifest weapon will be good. But that's my plan for this class, and that's all I have to say for you, tell you guys with this video. Again, as always, I don't want to rant on and waste your time. And I'm going to ask you, as always, hit the like button, subscribe for more content. Please leave a comment down below. It helps the YouTube algorithm. I appreciate support and appreciate it. So thank you so much for that. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe. Keep rocking.